The crowd barely had time to catch their breath after the Montreal Grand Prix before the controversies began rolling in. Max Verstappen wasn't just frustrated, he was visibly holding back, not ready to speak, not out of calmness, but out of disbelief. His irritation wasn't limited to what happened on track. It ran deeper, rooted in the silence and delay that followed the checkered flag. George Russell had slowed suddenly under the safety car, almost daring Max into a trap. Brake harder and risk falling back, or hold position and face a penalty. Verstappen had to think on his feet, and the outcome left him confused and angry. Meanwhile, Red Bull was already preparing a protest behind the scenes. Over at McLaren, the drama wasn't any less intense. Lando Norris made contact with teammate Oscar Piastri late in the race, a move that not only jeopardized both cars, but shocked even the engineers on the pit wall. The incident looked like a classic case of misjudgment, something rarely seen from a driver at this level. But what caught everyone off guard wasn't the collision itself, but the lack of consequences. A 5-second time penalty was issued, but it had no effect. No license points, no official reprimand, just silence. No answers came for hours. The race results stood frozen as rumors took over online platforms, while fans refreshed their phones endlessly, desperate for clarity. What should have been a standard post-race celebration turned into confusion. Teams waited, drivers had already left, and still, no word from officials. For many, it was no longer just about a few penalties. It was about whether the system could be trusted at all. As the minutes turned into hours, frustration began to build, not just among fans, but within the paddock itself. Drivers, engineers, and analysts alike were left questioning how such key moments could be handled with so little urgency or transparency. Verstappen's split-second reaction to Russell's sudden deceleration could have resulted in a penalty, but instead, it was George who walked away unscathed, with the win and no official warning. Red Bull, unsurprisingly, didn't take it lightly. They believed Russell's move was intentional, designed to bait Verstappen into making a mistake. Their protest argued two main points. Russell slowed too sharply, and he allowed too much distance between himself and the safety car, both of which are breaches of existing rules. But Mercedes fired back. They said it was standard tire warming, and pointed to Russell's car data showing low brake pressure. They also claimed yellow flag limits played a role in how close he could stay to the safety car. The FIA sided with Mercedes. Even Red Bull ended up withdrawing part of their complaint after failing to find solid proof. In the end, nothing changed except the tone in the paddock. Some wondered if Red Bull was chasing fairness or simply hoping to use the rulebook to their advantage. The whole sequence turned attention away from Russell's driving and toward Red Bull's actions. And as for Russell, his cool demeanor and quick radio reaction made others suspect he knew exactly what he was doing. The onboard footage showed him looking into his mirrors just before slowing. Moments later, Verstappen edged ahead for a second. That alone could have brought a penalty, but the explanation given was accepted that it was all part of routine driving behavior. To some, that was clever. To others, it looked like manipulation of the rules right up to the line, but not over it. Russell's maneuver might not have crossed the line officially, but it left a lot of people uncomfortable. His precise control of the situation, slowing just enough, checking his mirrors, and radioing in the moment, Verstappen edged forward, looked less like coincidence and more like careful planning. The message: he knew the limits and how far he could go without being penalized. While Mercedes stayed quiet, letting Russell handle the aftermath, the stewards ruled in his favor. They cited no excessive brake pressure and no violation of the 10-car length rule behind the safety car. Just like that, George kept the win and walked away looking composed, even calculated. Some praised the way he handled it. Others felt he had used the system to his benefit. But whatever the opinion, the bigger issue was now obvious inconsistency. Verstappen had been hit with 3 penalty points in Spain for a move that many felt was less questionable than Russell's. In Canada, that call had real consequences. And when fans compare that to Montreal, where both Russell and Norris escaped nearly untouched, the contrast becomes hard to ignore. Norris's situation, in particular, drew even more outrage. He didn't just clip another driver, he made contact with his own teammate, and not during a hectic start, but in the final stages. During a clean fight for positions, he lunged into a space that wasn't quite there, tapped Piastri's car, and the result could have ended both their races. Norris ended up retiring, but the stewards only handed out a 5-second penalty, which had zero effect since he didn't finish the race anyway. No penalty points. No real punishment. What shocked fans wasn't just the light penalty, it was the absence of consistency. In recent seasons, when a driver is clearly at fault for a crash, especially one that risks a teammate's race, it almost always leads to penalty points. Yet this time, nothing. That raised an uncomfortable question. Was the decision based on the outcome, or the action itself? Because if it's the result that matters, then reckless moves will keep getting ignored, as long as the damage isn't too bad. And that's where the frustration really grew. Norris's move was avoidable, impatient, and had serious potential to wipe out a huge result for McLaren. Even those defending the decision admitted it didn't look good. Some said the team dynamic played a role. Maybe the stewards hesitated because it was an intra-team issue. Others argued Piastri's race wasn't badly damaged, but is that how fairness should work? Should reckless decisions be judged by luck? If Piastri had spun out or retired, would Norris have been punished more harshly? The problem is, those questions don't have clear answers. And when things are that uncertain, trust in the stewards starts to wear thin. Fans weren't the only ones losing patience. Drivers began speaking up, not always publicly, but enough to make it clear that something isn't working. 5 hours after the race ended, results were still up in the air. Teams waited in silence. The official verdicts arrived late, and when they did, they solved very little. Instead of clarity, there were more contradictions, more questions. Why one move earns 3 penalty points, and another gets nothing? Why the rules seem firm one week and flexible the next? At the center of this storm was the FIA, once again under pressure for how it handles incidents that shape races. Montreal wasn't just about mistakes on track. It was about what followed. Long delays, vague justifications, and a sense that some teams or drivers are treated differently than others. And when Max Verstappen picked up 3 points in Barcelona, for a move that many called borderline, only to watch Norris and Russell walk away almost untouched in Canada. The comparisons were inevitable. The difference in response wasn't just surprising, it hinted at something deeper. Fans began asking whether past reputation or team status was playing a role in these decisions. That's a dangerous road, because the moment people start believing the system favors some over others, the sport begins to lose its foundation. Penalty points aren't just numbers, they add up. They affect driver behavior, and eventually, they can lead to race bans. Verstappen is now 1 point away from that scenario, not because of anything that happened in Canada, but due to an earlier incident now seen in a different light because of what followed. Meanwhile, Red Bull wasn't content to leave the track quietly. The team immediately filed a protest after the race, targeting George Russell's conduct behind the safety car. Their argument was straightforward. Russell slowed too much, too suddenly, and it forced Verstappen into a bad spot. A spot where he had to either back off aggressively or pass illegally. Either way, Red Bull felt they had a case. And considering how tight the margins are this season, every detail matters. But as Red Bull pressed forward with their protest, the situation took a turn. The FIA reviewed the data, Russell's on board, his brake pressure, the timing with the safety car. Mercedes defended the move as completely within the rules. They pointed to tire warming, to yellow flag deltas, and showed that Russell never applied more than moderate braking. More than that, they claimed he kept the required distance to the safety car. After careful analysis, the FIA sided with them. Red Bull, realizing one of their claims couldn't be firmly supported, withdrew part of their own protest. In the end, the whole challenge was dismissed. What was left wasn't a ruling against Russell, it was a bigger question about Red Bull's approach. Were they truly fighting for fairness, or trying to overturn a result by pushing a technicality? The backlash was swift. Some saw it as desperation, not determination. A failed attempt to gain points off the track instead of earning them on it. Russell, meanwhile, kept quiet publicly, but his body language said enough. Calm, composed, and sharp behind the wheel. He had taken a win in a high-pressure scenario and walked away without even a scratch on his record. For some, that was the mark of a clever racer. For others, it showed just how much wiggle room exists in the rules, and how differently it's used depending on who's involved. Either way, it added fuel to the already burning debate about fairness and accountability in the sport as the dust from Montreal settles. 2 things are certain. First, the tension between Red Bull and Mercedes is heating up fast, and every wheel-to-wheel moment between Russell and Verstappen will now carry added weight. Second, the spotlight is now fully on the FIA. Their next decisions won't just affect standings. They'll decide whether fans and teams still believe in the rulebook. One thing's for sure, this story isn't over.